What is going on, everyone? Today we got the RX 9060 XT. We're going to be taking a look in Borderlands 4 at 1080p, 1440p, and 4K resolution. We're going to go through all the different settings to know what you can expect from this card on this title. Now, as usual, we're not overclocking anything, and we've got it paired today with a 14600K and 32 gigabytes of RAM at 6000 megahertz. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. If you're not new, thanks for coming back. I appreciate it. All right, what's going on, everyone? We are in Borderlands 4 again tonight. We're at 4K currently, and we have the RX 9060 XT paired with a 14600K, and we're starting off the test tonight with a 4K low setting. So we're not doing any upscaling at all, and I just wanted to kind of get a baseline here because it's looking like we are at 34 FPS, so we're definitely going to have to do a little bit better than this. I've got this area cleared out pretty well, and we'll be able to test pretty easily right here. I've done some other testing. Those videos you can check out down in the description if you're interested with some other cards. But right now we're on the 9060 XT and we're at 30 FPS. So let's just go ahead and implement some upscaling. Go ahead and just start with that because we're definitely going to need upscaling at 4K. So FSR quality, we're going to leave that on low just to see what kind of uplift that gives us. So right here, that gives us 54, 55 FPS, and that looks like kind of along the same lines, at least, of what I was expecting so far. So, yeah, low is still pretty hard to hit 60 with this card at 4K. Of course, we're going to go down in the resolutions and get this frame rate up a good bit. If you did want to play at 4K, though, it is somewhat possible. You can get 60 FPS here. At low settings, you're just not going to be able to like completely max everything out. So let's just keep on going down a little bit more on our FSR. We're probably going to have to just kind of accept at 4K that performance is just going to be how we're going to have to run it. At least that was the case on my 5060 Ti video. We just had to put it on performance and just treat it like that was the only way you can run it. And it looks like not too much different on this card as well. Which kind of makes sense. They're both 60 class cards. So, pick your flavor, I guess, NVIDIA or AMD here. Yeah, we're just going to keep going through this. 65 FPS, 66 FPS, looking like we're getting a little bit more performance out of it. So let's just shift on up to medium, keep that on balanced. Of course, no frame generation at all right now, but that gives us about 57, 58 FPS. And it, performs okay. We're able to go up to at least medium settings at 4K on a 60 class card, which that's pretty nice. All right, so let's just keep going up and see what we can push this to. I'm just curious what we need to do to get it to get all the way to that badass setting. If you hear fireworks, my neighbors think it's 4th of July all the time. All right, so if you hear fireworks, that's just what they do here. All right, so yeah, we're at 41, 40 FPS here. A lot to be desired. VRAM allocation's around 10, so we've got 16 on this card, so everything looks like it's going to be okay. So let's just keep on working our way up through these 4K settings before we shift down into the 1440 and 1080p test. All right, so that drops us to 33 FPS. Again, I didn't go to performance. I just kind of wanted to see what it would run like on this preset. So kind of what you expected at low, but with a lot of FSR, and that gets you up to a little bit higher preset, very high. So very high at balanced gives you about what low without any upscaling provides. So those kind of like play hand in hand a little bit there. The more you go up on your graphic preset, the more you go up on your quality of your, or a less quality, I guess, of your upscaling, the better. So, all right, so performance looks pretty darn good at 4K, but, as you can see, we're still at 41, 39 FPS here. So, unfortunately, very high with performance just doesn't quite cut it. Now, I wouldn't really want to ever go to ultra performance. You can kind of tell here and there with like some of these smaller lines. As I mentioned in my previous videos on this title, the art style itself kind of helps hide some of the normal fringing that you would get with upscaling. And that was kind of what I noticed earlier, and that seems to be still the case here. The art style itself kind of artificially hides some of that edge detail loss and some of the detail lost in like some of these smaller lines. It does start to show up whenever the lines start to get really tiny, like there's like some cracks over here in this pavement, and as I get closer to those tend to really start to kind of break down visually, I guess. But that does give you a 60 FPS experience. So if that's what you're after at very high, you can do that. Now we're just going to leave it on ultra performance. Badass is not much more badass than very high. Yeah, I have noticed that too on the 5060 Ti. When I switched up to a higher setting, a lot of the assets just don't load in. Like this is supposed to be a truck. There it goes. It's back. Magic. So yeah, I don't know what that's all about, but anyway, and that was on another system that was running a 9800X3D, so it's consistent across different CPUs and different GPUs. So, it's definitely the game. So anyway, that gives us 53 FPS here. Now, if I was on 4K, I just would not try to run it on anything but medium, and honestly, probably just performance. This is probably how I would set myself up and then frame generate from here, because that gives you a PCL of 60 milliseconds, which ain't great, but it ain't awful. For this kind of card, it's not like the end of the world. It's kind of in line with what I expected. But yeah, you're at 70 FPS here. Now, the PCL monitor, if I go to frame generation, it will unfortunately disable, so it won't operate. And that's a lot to do with the fact that I'm using FrameView, which is an NVIDIA thing, on a AMD card, because the Adrenaline software will not become part of the recording, so you just wouldn't see it. It just kind of like floats in the space that doesn't get captured. So it is kind of what it is, but you're just gonna have to trust me when it comes to AMD stuff when it's the frame generation portions. But it does feel very good. Our PCL is probably around that 60 still, maybe a little bit lower. It just kind of depends on the game and how it responds to frame generation. But you're looking at about 108 FPS. This is probably how I would play it on a 4K panel if you want to run, that full 4K experience. And just kind of like, accept the fact that this is just not a card meant for 4K on a game like this. But on a game like this, there's plenty of games that can run at 4K on a 60 class card that, are a little older or not as demanding. But this is definitely up there with one of the more demanding games that I have seen in a while. It is a smooth running title, as in the frame pacing is very good. It's nice and flat, but the FPS itself is just not that high. So, you could get a really high FPS experience and have a bunch of jank in that frame time graph, or you could have a smoother frame time graph, but not a whole, like, ridiculously high frame rate. So with that, let's just jump over to the 1440p segment, and then I'll keep going from there. All right, so here we are at 1440p. We're kind of starting over back on low with no upscaling. That gives us a 62 FPS experience. 8.8 on the utilized or on the allocated VRAM, and utilization is at 6.7. The shared VRAM is staying nice and locked at 237 megabytes, so no VRAM spill at all. We're looking really good. All right, so let's just keep going and see what we can do at 1440 before we, kind of just trim down to some of the DLSS, or not DLSS, I'm sorry, FSR. I've been reviewing NVIDIA cards all week so far, but yeah, we're just going to go to medium, no FSR right now, and we will see what this looks like. So this is just medium, no upscaling, and we're going to definitely need some upscaling here to keep that above 60. So let's just go ahead and jump over into the FSR portion and see how far we can get with the upscaling set to quality. So let's just keep that on medium. Come over here, FSR quality gives us a nice boost up to 82 FPS. Again, this is you know, a nice smooth experience. That frame time graph looks really good. Everything is nice and smooth, although the frames aren't as high as I would love them to be. But, you know, it is a 60 class card at the end of the day, so we can't expect miracles. But this is a nice experience. You know, we're just running quality FSR at that medium setting. So let's just go up and see what high gives us. Leave it on quality. We don't need to upscale anymore right now. We're still above 60. If my voice sounds a little hoarse, I'm getting over a really bad infection. Anybody who has followed me for the last like 2 weeks has known that I have been fighting some sort of medieval virus. I'm finally at the end of it, but it has totally cooked my voice, and I'm doing a lot of talking today with this title coming out so recently. So if I sound like the Crypt Keeper, that's why. All right, so I am at 65 FPS. 68 FPS, so let's just keep on going up. It looks like we might be able to make 1440 work pretty well based on what I'm seeing right now. So at 55, 54, you could go down to balanced and get that back up. So we're gonna take care of that now. Sorry, I had to break and get some water. All right, so we're at 10.3 on our allocated VRAM, and our PCL is at 81 milliseconds. So your latency is definitely being affected by this 50 FPS experience. So we're just going to go up. So we're going to leave it on very high and go down to balanced and see if that helps our FPS as well as our latency. Our latency is around 64 milliseconds. I would like for it to be a little bit higher, but that's not too terribly bad. Typically, I like anything around 50 for like a story-based, you know, character type of game, not a first-person shooter. For first-person shooters, I like it to be pretty low. For other games, like third-person view kind of stuff, like Control or Hell Is Us or any of those types of games, really around 80 is okay. And I'm kind of more tolerant than a lot of people of that latency, but that's kind of where I personally like to shoot for, is between 50 and 80, depending on the game. Of course, anything lower than 50 is even better. But right here we're at 53 FPS. It tends to duck down a little bit right here as far as the actual frame rate goes. It dips a little bit, especially up here on this like kind of mountainous area. Near this light, it tends to drop down a little bit too. Yeah, so 55 right there. All right, so 72 on the milliseconds on the PCL. So let's see what performance can do. So performance FSR at 4K, or not at 4K, performance FSR at 1440p resolution. That gives us a 70 FPS experience with a PCL of 52. This is way, way, way better. That is, you know, kind of, you know, where you want to be, I would say, you know, if you want to play through the story element. This is not like a competitive setting. I'll try to address that. Although this is a 14600K, it is a 9060, so we might be okay as far as competition settings go. I just don't want to mislead anyone, you know, if the CPU becomes a bottleneck at 1080p. It shouldn't with a 60 class card like this, but, you know, just putting that disclaimer out there. I'll test it out and see how it goes. All right, so 64 FPS there. So let's just jump over, go up to Badass and see what it performs like with Performance FSR. Okay, so Badass settings, Performance FSR, that gives you 59, 58, 60. That is like, you know, not bad. I mean, it's definitely like hanging in there. It might be by a thread, but it's giving you 60 most of the time. I'll put it that way. So really, if you wanted to play through the story, you could just kick on some of that frame generation. Now up here, it does dip down. I don't know if it's just got something to do with these lights and running Lumen, which is a lighting technology in Unreal, which is the engine that this runs on. So, you know, it's not going to be 60 all the time, it looks like. If you wanted 60 all the time, you're going to have to either give up some of your preset or go down to Ultra Performance. Now, Ultra Performance at 1440 is not great, but it does get your frame rate up a good bit. Your PCL's down to about 46 milliseconds. So, you know, if you don't care about this slight fuzziness, this is another option. You know, I like to just kind of show you all of the ways you can play, and these are not recommendations. by any means. I just, it's just information. All right. So yeah, 88, 80-ish FPS, 85 here and there. All right. So really the way I would probably run it on this setting here with frame generation off, this would probably be where I would run it at, would be high with performance. Let's just see if I'm right. I don't know if I will be or not. Yeah, 86. Okay, so I was pretty right. That sounds good. I like being right when I'm not too sure before I click the button. But 43 milliseconds, 79 FPS here. No frame generation necessary. Of course, you can go up a little bit, it looks like, and not really worry too much about losing performance. You're at 69 FPS. So maybe around here would be a pretty good option. I did like having that lower PCL, but you do have to kind of play a little bit of give and take with this card at 1440. And it's just, I mean, this title, it runs smooth, but man, it is just like, where are the frames? Like it is just like not a high performing title when it comes to the FPS itself. So, for what it's worth, it is a smooth experience. There's not a lot of hitching and glitching and all that stuff. So that's kind of nice, I guess. All right. So you can run it very high on performance, throw that, frame generation on, and this would be a pretty nice experience because you got plenty of VRAM left over to do that frame gen. Again, I lose my PCL, but it was a very nice low latency setting or low latency number. In the high 50s, low 60s. That's not too bad when you're not competing. I find that acceptable. And you're at 126 FPS. All right. So now that we've gotten out of the 1440, let's jump into the 1080p. And I'm going to kind of gear this a little bit more toward potentially someone who's wanting to look at competition settings. So I'll start pretty low and see how hard in the paint I can go, so to speak. And then I'll test some of the more like pretty settings, I guess, for lack of a better term. But I'll do that now and I'll be right back. Okay, so like I mentioned, I'm going to run this initially with like a competition setting in mind. The usage of the GPU has dipped a little bit lower. It shows that the CPU might be holding it back a tiny, tiny bit. Not the end of the world, and it could honestly just be the title. I have noticed that this game, for whatever reason, no matter what card I have in it, I could pair it with a 9800X 3D, and it doesn't want to run the GPU full out. I mean, it's still like wants to float around 97, 98, even with like a AMD 9800X 3D running at like 4K. I mean, whatever. It's just like not gonna do it for whatever reason. So there could be a little of that. There could be a little bit of bottlenecking on the CPU because we are running at performance with low settings. So it is really pumping some frames out right now. Our PCL is at 22 milliseconds, and the as you can see, the usage of the CPU is quite high. And the usage of the GPU is not getting near that, 99% like you like to see, but it is giving us a nice high frame rate. I mean, you're at 150 FPS here. So let's just see what we can do as far as making it, a little bit nicer to look at and potentially easing off some of that pressure from the CPU at the moment. So let's just go with, let's go with a quality setting. We'll just start at medium. I think it's going to run pretty well at this setting. So medium upscaling, and or medium with quality upscale. I'm sorry, and yeah, that gets us around 110 FPS with a 34 millisecond PCL. So anything at 1080p is going to run great. It's just going to be up to you. Do you want to be more of a competition setting, or do you want it to be more of like a story? Don't really care about having the absolute most FPS in the world. That's just kind of personal. But, right here, let's just jump over and see kind of what it runs like with no upscaling. I'm just going to kind of like start where we would normally start now that we've kind of got a look at kind of that lower competition setting, sort of, so to speak. Again, when I mention competition, I don't compete. So if I'm wrong about something, I'm going to lean on, you guys to let me know. And I know you will. Just let me know if I'm doing something wrong or you want to see something a little different. I'm all ears. All right, so let's go with that low setting with the FSR totally disabled, just to kind of get like a baseline of kind of where we're going to be, and as we go up, we'll enable some of that FSR. All right, so it looks like we're at 97 on our usage, 96 on our usage, so that did bring it up a little bit, which makes sense because you're taking more of that pressure off of the CPU. As you can see, it went down about 35%, and putting it on the GPU. The GPU is the bottleneck here. That's what you want. You want the GPU to be doing all the grunt work, and then the CPU kind of just like shoveling, the JPEGs onto the screen, so to speak. That's a really crap analogy, but maybe one day I'll break it down. But for time's sake, that's kind of what's going on here. All right, so 91 FPS. Let's just kind of go up through our settings again like we normally do and see how far we can go without any sort of upscaling. All right, so we're looking like 82, 79. Yeah, this is going to be fine. PCL's around 50. That's great. All right, so yeah, we are allocating about 9.1 gigs, using about 7.1. All right, so 76 FPS. Great, that sounds good. Let's just keep on going and see how far we can go without needing any upscaling, and I'm hoping it's very high, but we'll see. No, it's high. We're going to need to upscale it high at freaking 1080p. Good Lord. All right, this game. Okay, so 55 FPS here. Usage, of course, went up to 98%. That's kind of what you want to see. The game is getting harder to run, so the usage of that CPU is going down as the usage of the GPU is going up. All right, perfect. We're getting to a more balanced state as far as like the CPU and the GPU data flow. All right, so we're looking like 62. So let's go ahead and do an upscale. All right, so let's kick on FSR quality and then just keep running through our settings here. So FSR quality on high gets you 90 FPS and 42 milliseconds of latency. It's kind of bugging out on me a little bit. It does that. Just again, bear with it. It's an AMD card running some NVIDIA software, so it's going to glitch here and there. So at least it gives us good data. All right, so 85 FPS. Nothing to complain about here. I think this would be fine. Quality still looks nice and sharp at 1080p. So let's just keep going, see how far up we can go. We are going to click into here and go up to that very high. Leave it on quality. We don't need to upscale any further at the moment. It looks like 66, 67 FPS. Yeah, so 50 milliseconds on your PCL. All right, so I'm going to run over here and go to this like mountain area just to get a little bit of a dip, see how far it dips. I'm just going to assume this is kind of like worst case scenario up here for most of the game at least. All right, so we're not dropping under 60 over here, which that's a pretty good sign. 71, 73, that looks good. All right, let's go up to the last setting of Badass, which I absolutely love that setting name. I think more games should name Ultra Badass. I support that message. All right, so that gives us 61, 58, 59. So still not 60 all of the time. We are significantly working the GPU more at 1080p. And the only reason I'm mentioning this now is because generally at 1440 and 4K, CPU bottlenecking, so to speak, generally isn't an issue. All right, so let's come down and check out what balanced looks like. Let's just jump over here to balanced. That gives you a nice 70 FPS experience with a 55 millisecond latency. This is probably where I would kick on that frame generation, to be honest. I would kick that frame generation on right here, and this is how I would play it at 1080p. I would just keep it on Badass, FSR balanced, kick that frame generation on, and we would call that a day if I actually clicked the button and didn't just spaz out and forget to do it. All right, so Badass, balanced, and full resolution, of course, frame generation. All right, so that gives me 123 FPS. Our GPU is being totally maximized, 99%. CPU is keeping up just fine with it, which is what I want to see. PCL, of course, is non-existent because I'm frame generating, but it feels fine. It feels really good. I would probably guess about 50 or so, which is, exactly where I think you are, I think that's where most people are happy at anyway. And then, of course, 160 FPS. Nobody can complain about that, really. All right, so that has been the 9060 XT 16 gigabyte on Borderlands 4 at 4K, 1440, and 1080p. If you like this kind of thing, I invite you to hit that little subscribe button. That would be awesome. If you have a question, let me know, and we will see everyone in the very next video. Peace.